Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm Saladino. Okay, so I've been meaning to read this article from The Gamer for quite some time now, ever since I saw this terrifying headline. Women and non-binary devs now make up 32% of all game developers, up from 24% in 2022. Now, the terrifying part of this headline is you read it and you go, of course. That's why you look at this picture of Aloy that the gamer is using for this article. You look at this picture and you go, this is why Aloy looks like this now. They nerfed her beauty from the first game. Her face is fatter. She's got rosacea now. They're going out of their way to make her as unappealing as possible, as unsexualized as possible. Now, she wasn't all that sexualized in the first game. But in the second game, they really went out of their way to mute her beauty. And yet they want to make her a thing. And it's because they have these women and non-binary devs telling everybody that women don't want to see beautiful women in games, even though women are not the largest fan base of games. It's not really their hobby. When we talk about mobile games, fine. But this is overrepresentation, this women and non-binary stuff. Now, the funny thing about this headline is that it says women and non-binary and not women, trans, and non-binary. That's because these clowns are including trans in the women part of this headline. So this is an article by someone named Sam Woods. I'm not familiar with Sam Woods. I don't think I've ever read any Sam Woods article from The Gamer. There's a lot of people who I really don't like in The Gamer because they're just so disingenuous. They're such weasels. The worst one is Stacey Henley, but there's a lot of hateful people who write for The Gamer. But let's see what Sam Woods has to say for him or herself or themself or whatever. Summary. Males still make up 66% of game developers, down from 75% in 2020. Almost a quarter of developers identify as LGBTQ+, a 3% increase. Racial diversity at studios is improving, but the majority of developers are still white Caucasian. Almost a quarter of developers identify as the alphabet community. It's insane. That's overrepresentation. Now, it's one thing if they're all just making indie games, but they're not. They're in AAA studios, responsible for making AAA games. Look at Dragon Age of Veilguard. The game development space is undergoing a seismic shift in its diversity makeup, with the GDC State of the Game Industry report finding that 32% of all game developers now identify as female and non-binary. See, I told you that the women in the headline meant trans women. This is up 3% when compared to last year's report and 8% when compared to 2022's. However, it suggests that women and non-binary developers are still slightly underrepresented when compared to their male counterparts. None of this has anything to do with why people play games. If a studio is made up of nothing but white men and they're making great games, then don't mess that up. If a woman or a black man or a black woman comes to the studio and they actually have talent and they're not captured by ideology, great, add them to it. But nobody should be forced to just DEI inject everything into their studio and water everything down. The problem with this 32% or whatever of these non-binary women or whatever in the game industry is that they water everything down. Everything has to be changed for them. Everything has to be half-assed because I've always said this. I keep saying this. In most of these studios, like in comic book companies, you can't draw a cover of a sexy Zatanna with her juicy ass hanging out because there's going to be a woman or some non-binary person, some feminist who's going to complain saying that they feel unsafe because of how sexy the character is. Like somehow that's going to harm them because men like to see sexy women. So if you have a game developer who wants to make an American Stellar Blade, you're not going to be able to do it because of the trans women, the non-binary women, the activists, the feminists at the studio who are going to complain about it. You can't have GTA be edgy and have all kinds of racial jokes and LGBT jokes and that kind of thing because the black people there, the LGBT, the alphabet people there are going to complain. They're going to say they feel unsafe and that they're going to say that you're emboldening the straight white male fan base to attack them. That's the thing. It's so manipulative. It's so cynical that it's destroyed true creativity in Western gaming space. It's ridiculous. GDC's report finds that men still make up 66% of all game developers, down from 75% in 2020, a 9% decrease over the last 4 years. 66%, of course, still puts males in the majority. They say that like that's a bad thing, and it's not a bad thing. And of course, they do think it's a bad thing. They act like it should be 50-50, but they really want it to be 100%. But even then, what do they think that 100% is going to look like? How many trans women, how many women, how many black people, how many Latinas? Like, it's stupid to look at that like how, talk about a film and they go line by line for each character. And if the female character has less than the male, they think that's a problem. Like the whole thing with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is truly one of the greatest films of all time. And for them to, for critics to look at that and go, well, you had Margot Robbie in the movie, but she had less lines than Brad Pitt and DiCaprio. That's a problem. When it's like, I'm telling the story. Each character has as many lines as they need to tell the story and to create this universe. It has nothing to do with everybody having the same amount of lines, the same amount of screen time, the same amount of, each one equally have the same amount of black people, white people, women, trans, non-binary. That's not how any of this creativity stuff works. And it doesn't make sense even in the business sense, because you're hiring people who don't care about the stuff. You're just putting them in there to say that you have them there. But then you're making stuff like Dragon Age the Veilguard. Alongside an increase in women and non-binary developers, the report found that almost a quarter of game developers, 24%, identified as LGBTQ+. This represents a 3% year-on-year increase. It found that almost half, 43% of developers aged between 18 to 24, identify as LGBTQ+, with women far more likely to do so. Of course, and it's like they're not even going to critically address why that is. That a lot of these women are just following a trend and that they don't even care about this space. They're just in it because they're being pushed in it, or they want to push their activism, or it's trendy to talk about games, so they want to be in games. A lot of them probably won't even last. Like, we're not even talking about the layoffs. I don't even know how layoffs affect these stats now, but I just think it's interesting that there's this push that, it's still 66% male, but the amount of people that they have in the industry now of these trans, non-binary women have infected it so much that you make Concord. You make Dustborn. That's more than enough to destroy an industry. They don't need more. In terms of ethnicity, the State of the Game Industry report found that 59% of developers were white, Caucasian, 10% were Hispanic, Latino, or of Spanish origin, and only 3% were Black, African, or Caribbean. If they like games, if they're talented and creative, if they know the basics so you could teach them more, then fine, add them to it. But if they don't just stick them in there for representation. This split meant that there was a slight increase in racial diversity at game studios, with the number of white Caucasian respondents down from 64%. A lot of them got Me Too'd out of there. But development houses were still predominantly staffed by the latter. The publishers of the report do note that due to the fact that the survey takes place in the United States, certain responses may not always represent the views of the global community at large. Well, you can't be an all-Chinese studio and make a game about your Chinese culture without the West attacking you for it. So the culmination of the global game developer community section of GDC's report found that 35% of all respondents were white, male, and not part of the alphabet community. I don't feel like saying it all again. It shows that while strides have been made to diversify the industry, there's still a little way to go. By this time, I've said this enough, and I think we all know this. This is why we're part of this culture war stuff. We've been dragged into it. It's not something that you don't just say, I'm going to do culture war today. You're dragged into it. You're playing your hobby. You're involved in your hobby. You're reading your comic books, playing your games, whatever. And then activists come in along and say, there's not enough gay representation in the book that you're enjoying. I don't like it, so I'm going to change it. This character is too sexy. Because of that, you're going to see women in real life in a different way. You're going to treat them like objects. I'm going to change it. And then all of a sudden, bam, you're in a culture war. So this idea that, well, we've showed strides to diversify. What does it mean to diversify if all you're doing is just putting people of different colors in the mix, but they're not adding anything to it? They're destroying it. They're detracting from it. And that's the point of this. This is why this is an issue for them, that they need more diversity, because they're trying to destroy the industry. It's so stupid that you literally have, it's like, okay, you're a white author. And actually, it was so funny because I keep wanting to do the KCD2 video talking about that drama. And at one point, Daniel Vavra, before he did his big heel turn, he was in a conversation with, I think it was Tariq Musa from, was it GameSpot IGN? I forgot where Tariq Musa is from, but I was looking at this thread where he's saying, I'm a white game developer. Vavra was saying this. Is it my responsibility to represent other people's culture? Like, I can't make a game set in medieval Bohemia without people telling me that it's too white? It's the whole thing where, talk about the movie, I did a video about it, talk about the movie The Northman, where people were attacking it for being too white and the women being too blonde and it being, what do you expect? It's in Iceland in like 800 something. Where are the black people supposed to come from? Where's the diversity supposed to come from? Why would it even matter? It's that you're threatened by this because of your political ideology. And people who care about art and entertainment history, they're supposed to somehow care about this shit. Like, they're supposed to care about, oh, we're making strides because we're adding more trans and non-binary people to this. I don't care if these people are trans and non-binary. What does that have to do with why I'm playing video games? These people suck. There's not enough of them for them all to be good and to have quality. You're not going to find that. Calls for broader diversity in the gaming space have been growing for several years now, and several prominent game developers and studios have spoken up about the issue. There is no issue. They're just making it an issue. Last year, Tales of Kenzera Zhao's director Abu Bakr Salim delivered a heartfelt message following racial abuse he'd received. Now, he's conflating whatever racial abuse he received with the criticism that he's connected to Sweet Baby Inc. So no matter what his game was, nobody was going to support it because of Sweet Baby Inc. Sweet Baby Inc. was being boycotted. So the few people who bought it, fine. But those of us who didn't buy it, who boycotted it on the strength of Sweet Baby Inc., not because of racial abuse. So yeah, following on racial abuse he received, saying that diverse games are for everyone. The problem isn't diverse games for everyone. The problem is how much diversity they stick in games that don't need, require, or actually should have diversity in them. You shouldn't put black people in a game about Vikings unless the Vikings are traveling to Africa or something. And CD Projekt Red's CEO recently rubbished claims that diversity hires were ruining the studio. These are the same assholes who hired a woman who not only worked with, yet again, Sweet Baby Inc., but who wrote one of the writers on Spider-Man 2 Electric Boogaloo. CD Projekt Red is cooked. But as support grows for these initiatives, so does discontent from a vocal minority. Vocal minority. Here they go again with that vocal minority BS. It's always a vocal minority until somebody loses their job.
Oh my God!